Hello, I am Nurbek Sevitukhunov and you're watching news from Kazakhstan. An explosion rocked one of the houses in the town of Atyrau on Wednesday, September 5th. The Regional Department of Internal Affairs does not confirm allegations of a suicide bomb. According to preliminary data, the incident resulted from careless handling of an explosive device.
The blast on the Moldakulova street occurred approximately at 1 p.m. The police, medics and firefighters were quick to arrive at the scene and secured the area. At present, law enforcement do not disclose any information about the incident, although it is known that during a call to the duty officer of the emergency department, eyewitnesses reported about a suicide bomber. The 21-year-old Nurbek Sakaov, who rented the apartment, is the only casualty known at the moment. Today at around 1:20 p.m. an explosion was reported in the apartment block 94 on the Moldakulova street, killing an unidentified male.
This is not the first blast to rock Atyrau. Two explosions happened last October, with one device planted inside a garbage bin, and later a suicide bombing in the Sarayarka micro-district. On the next day, law enforcement agencies conducted a special operation and detained suspects. A criminal case was initiated, while a previously unknown terrorist organization, the Soldiers of Caliphate, claimed responsibility for the blasts. Just recently, top brass of the Regional National Security Committee, Financial Police, and Prosecutor's Office has been replaced following the resignation and possible arrest of the former governor, Birgit Skaliyev.
Relatives of the Turishev family that passed away in Ilia-Alatau National Park are asking for help. On Wednesday, they spoke to journalists for the first time after the tragic incident. The family has been unable to return the bodies of Dmitry, his spouse Svetlana, and their daughter Victoria for almost a month due to various expert examinations. In the meantime, the family has no financial means to perform a funeral.
On Wednesday, relatives of the Turishev family killed in the Ilia-Alatau National Park called a press conference asking for help with the funeral of their loved ones and setting a memorial in the Ilia-Alatau National Park. We need help in organizing the ceremony, and we also wanted Sasha to continue studies or start working somewhere. On August 12th, the Turishev's family, including Dmitry, his spouse Svetlana, and their daughter Victoria, went out of town to visit their friend and gamekeeper Alexei Shkilov. What happened that night is still a mystery, but on the next day, the scorched bodies of Dmitry Turishev, his daughter, and 8 other victims were found in the area. Svetlana's body was found late on August 28th. Law enforcement officials kept silence for quite some time, just reporting occasionally that they are still searching for the Igor Zakharopula, the son of the killed anti-poaching activists. After 2 weeks of searches, the Minister of Interior, General Kasimov, suddenly announced that Alexei Shkilov, the gamekeeper, has been detained as a suspect in the mass murder case in Daksai Gorge. The brother of Dmitry Turishev questioned this development. Our family has known Alexei Shkilov for a long time. My brother Alexander and I grew up together with him. We've been family friends. I heard of his version, but we do not support it because we were friends with Shkilov. During the summer, we visited him twice in the mountains. We're gathering mushrooms together, helped him with haymaking, and spent a lot of time together. The ground for the arrest of the sole survivor of the tragedy in Daksai Gorge was the discovery of 2 burnt rifles in his house. He was first detained for 7 days, and then his term was extended to 2 months. Now the gamekeeper is detained at the special detention facility of the Karasai Regional Department of Interior. Shkilov has a house that we offered as bail, but they refused. The court once again came up with unmotivated decision, leaving our appeal without change, and Shkilov will remain under arrest for now. There is no real evidence. All they have are these firearms that we allegedly kept illegally and that were found in the rubble. They don't have any other evidence. People who knew Alexei Shkilov do not believe he is guilty and describe him as a man who avoided conflicts. But the lands of the Ilia-Alatau National Park are considered quite a tidbit. Thus, the gamekeeper's attorney links the arrest of his client to the land dispute and claims that one of the police officers involved has been eyeing a plot for a while. He had an argument with the park management and filed a lawsuit related to this shack. As far as I know, the court decided in his favor and he allowed him to keep it. Afterwards, he sued his neighbor in relation to his house in Chapai village. 19-year-old Alexander is the only survivor in his family. On the fateful day, he didn't go to the park with his parents and sister and stayed home to keep an eye on it. Alexander is very depressed at the moment and almost don't talk. 2 homes in our neighborhood were robbed recently and we decided not to leave the apartment unattended. That is why I had to stay back. When we came to see him and started talking, he told us he just doesn't know how to live after what happened and that his life is over. But we tried to talk to him and persuade him not to do anything stupid. The sister of Svetlana Turisheva, Yelena, hopes that the bodies of her relatives will be buried soon. She identified her brother-in-law and niece by the chair chain and cell phone. On August 19th, she and Alexander gave blood samples for DNA tests. But for over 2 weeks now, Yelena doesn't know the status of the investigation and what the outcome of the test is. We don't know anything, nobody gives us any information. They just tell us to wait and that they will call us once there is some information. In the meantime, everyone has the same question, namely whether sole survivors will always be guilty in such cases, since the situation is very similar to that of the Arkan-Kergen massacre. The family of the victims are also concerned that if Alexei Shkilov will be convicted of murdering 12 people, the real culprits won't be found and punished at all.
Defense lawyer in the case over opposition politicians Alexei Plugov announced that the exiled banker Mukhtar Ablazov is ready to testify as a witness.
The attorney made a motion to question Ablazov and also the staff chair of the newspaper Golos Respubliki, Irina Petrushova, chief editor of Vzгляд Igor Wieniawski, and vice president of the Polish Foundation Open Dialogue Lyudmila Kozlovsky. He proposed to conduct the questioning via a Skype conference. The Aktau court already had a similar experience during the trial of 37 oil workers. However, the last time Skype was used for anonymous witnesses testifying in support of prosecution's line. According to the attorneys, the aforementioned citizens have shared with the court the copies of their documents and Skype contacts. The judge was yet to make a decision on the motion. In the meantime, on his official Facebook page, Ablazov commented on the Skype phone conference wiretapping actively quoted by the prosecution during the trial. This Skype conference was held in 2010. I never hid my political views and always said that Kazakhstan must be free and democratic. There is a need for political reform in the country, and I am all for a parliamentary republic. It is necessary to achieve the fall of Nazarbayev's regime and hold fair and transparent elections. The winners should be the ones who can offer their best for our country. The recording was made on the voice recorder, which was confiscated by the National Security Committee members, who later edited it, added video, and uploaded it on YouTube.
Two Al-Kha Party organizing committee members spoke at the trial on Wednesday. The judge's questions mostly touched on party finances and records of conferences via Skype with Mukhtar Ablazov. Public activist Yerlan Kaliyev was also present and fielded a number of provoking questions from the prosecution. Also on Wednesday, member of European Parliament Peter Borish was in attendance.
Peter Borish reported about his trip to Zhanozyan and meetings with local residents and authorities. He also gave a short political assessment of politician Vladimir Kozlov. The member of European Parliament asked the judge to let him express his opinion on the latest events in Kazakhstan, but wasn't allowed to do so. After exiting the courtroom, Borish stated that to avoid the repeat of last year's events, people who opened fire at civilians in Zhanozyan should be punished, while charges against opposition should be dropped. During Mr. Kozlov's visit to the European Parliament, he talked about the freedom of speech and a need of peaceful and gradual development of Kazakhstan, which should be an evolutionary process. That was the main reason why we invited him to speak in front of the European Parliament. I came here to check whether the standards of the authorities on the transparent and peaceful settlement of the trial match with the reality. I believe the people who were protesting had a right to express their opinion, and the problem is in the local authorities that couldn't handle the conflict.
A press conference on the trial took place in Moscow on Wednesday. Kazakhstan's and Russia's public and human rights activists shed light and shared their opinions on the case of inciting social hatred with journalists.
The press conference on the trial of a Kazakhstan politician Vladimir Kozlov was organized downtown Moscow by social activists from Kazakhstan Aynur Kurmanov and Russian human rights activist Lev Ponomarev. Opposition members in both countries are fighting against the repressive regimes. The current situation in Kazakhstan is what Russia is going to face soon. This is the conclusion that the prominent Russian human rights activist made after returning from Aktau, where he attended the trial against opposition politicians. The charges against Vladimir Kozlov, the leader of the party Alga, pending registration, are similar to the accusations against some of Russian opposition members. He's accused of starting riots in Zhanozyan. The charges do not match the testimonies of the prosecution witnesses who cannot prove anything. The charges can be considered sound if, for example, he had hired thugs, but he didn't do anything like that. There are actual accusations of the opposition opposing the authorities. But Kozlov, of course, acted in a great manner during the trial, and I would love to bring all our opposition members just to see the trial. Currently, Lev Ponomarev is the only human rights activist from Russia who is trying to draw the attention of Western and Russia's civil society to the Zhanaozen tragedy and its repercussions. Among the organizations, it is done by the little-known in Kazakhstan Committee for a Workers' International. There are campaigns held in support of Zhanaozen oil workers and all others who became part of this case. We conduct these campaigns, and as a result, we have the release of Vadim Kuramshin. Ideally, the trial of Kozlov should follow the same trajectory as the process against Kazakhstan's human rights activist Vadim Kuramshin. However, everyone has a different forecast for the outcome of this case, and many doubt that even the international pressure will make a change. I believe that only the West can stop Nazarbayev because he cares about sustaining the image of the most democratic state in Central Asia, although we know what kind of democracy that is. I think that Western civil society will help Kazakhstan and will punish Kazakhstan's Khans. Despite the disputes, everyone agreed that the more the world knows about the current situation in Kazakhstan, the more grows the hope for Kazakhstan authorities to admit their faults.
Wednesday's first plenary session in Parliament turned out to be as short as the season opener. Deputies spent a mere half an hour in the House of Parliament.
Perhaps these young people can manage the city and replace Yesimov and Seydumanov. We believe this is a serious social and political issue. For many years, the rights of citizens for peaceful assembly have been violated. City administration representatives gave Social Democrats the letter of attorney, which gives them the right to defend the interest of Yesimov and Seydumanov in court. The politicians, however, were not satisfied, as they only want to deal directly with the city administration. Judge Iraley Bagbayev rejected NSDP's appeal, and the party leaders requested to disqualify him in return. After a few recesses, the motion was eventually rejected. The defendants have once again reiterated that the complainants are not likely to see senior officials during the upcoming trials. I have all the rights to speak on their behalf, and I want to say that when Mr. Abilov and others doubt my competence, it actually reinforces it. The city administration has trusted me to represent them in a court of law, and I will do so.
That was a story about court hearings in the National Social Democratic Party, Azat's lawsuit against Almaty city administration that were underway in Bostanlı court. The Social Democrats are thus attempting to get verbal approval to conduct demonstrations. However, instead of Mayor Akhmedjan Yesimov and his deputy Serik Seydumanov, young men who introduced themselves as chief specialists of the Domestic Policy Department served as defendants. Now, on to the story about the parliamentary session.
All 9 bills submitted for consideration have been unanimously adopted without a discussion. Gulnara Ksakova gave one of the most memorable speeches on the protection of children and youth from harmful influence of the media, perhaps following Russia's experience. Also, a new holiday is expected to appear in the calendar in 2013, after Dariga Nazarbayeva suggested reintroducing the Defenders' Day. According to the bill, the Defenders' Day on May 7th will become an official holiday of Kazakhstan. The committee is ready to elaborate the bill and draw up a final report by December 26. Another expected occurrence didn't take place at the first plenary session, as the chair of the parliament's vice speaker remained vacant. Bakhtakhaja Izmukhambetov, who held this position earlier, was recently appointed the governor of the Atrau region. The rumors around parliamentary lobby insist that Dariga Nazarbayeva is the next slate for the position. Nevertheless, the session ended with a few usual parliamentary inquiries, the most notable forwarded by Aytgul Samakova. The MP for once remembered the needs of ordinary people and suggested to governments to increase the minimum wage. The minimum wage rate in Kazakhstan is lower than that in other countries with similar economic conditions. For instance, the minimum wage in Russia is twice higher than in Kazakhstan.
The national leader has made a number of enterprising statements at an interactive lecture in Nazarbayev University. In a sense, the political thesis expected from the head of state at the opening of the parliamentary session were essentially voiced in front of yesterday's school children. It may seem that students of the president's namesake institution instill more trust in Nazarbayev than national parliamentarians. One of the subjects mentioned was higher responsibility for social and religious crimes.
Citizens of Kazakhstan are against extremism and radicalism. Our citizens have always acted against the unsound political promises and social discord. We are observing how in many countries political conflicts between ethnic groups take place. In the 21st century, no state is secure in this regard. In such conflicts, only evil wins and leads to breakdowns, starvation, and degradation. The president kept coming up with initiatives, some of them related to reforms in education. The head of state spoke of the need to introduce trilingual preschool education. He instructed the government to secure a step-by-step transition to per-student financing of schools, allowing the funding to continue in the case of students' transfer. In addition, the head of state said that by 2014, more than 500 schools will be built in Kazakhstan, perhaps in the anticipation of a forecasted baby boom. According to Nazarbayev, the high birth rate will continue until 2016. The student lecture was also accompanied with somewhat intimidating statements, as the president mentioned the sad situation of countries that experienced revolutions and called everyone not to rock the boat of Kazakhstan's stability. We see the repercussions of revolutions in North Africa. For example, in Libya, all the tribes are settling their scores with each other for the things that happened 10 years ago. These old conflicts and killings led to tribal massacres. In other states, you won't find peace on the streets where violence against women is evident. People get killed, and there is no authority to stop it. It was well said that the revolution is caused by poverty, and poverty causes revolutions. Today, in the 21st century, we live in a glass jar of sorts, inside of which you can see everything clearly. This world is transparent and fragile, which means you can't throw rocks around, as otherwise we might break the glass, which has to be protected.
A cheapskate pays twice. Karaganda region's industrial giant ArcelorMittal was fined $90,000. A supervisory body found that the city-forming enterprise sold electricity at inflated prices.
According to the prosecutor's office, the industrial giant sold electricity to enterprises at 4 cents instead of 3 per kilowatt, breaching the law on energy use. This led to a penalty which will be paid to the state treasury. ArcelorMittal set the rate which was higher than the regular one. In accordance with their contracts, the organization used the rate of $0.04 per kilowatt. But this is punishable by administrative responsibility, and the department fined them for $88,000. After this penalty, they won't repeat this anymore.
An unusual self-eviction campaign was held on Wednesday in the capital. Residents of one of the houses in place of which there are plans to build a heating plant attempted to draw attention of the public and the authorities to their problem. Homeowners are being evicted by court's decision, and land is taken in favor of the state.
Residents of this rundown building of a former public dormitory with small rooms which shelter several people at times decided to expose their living conditions to the public on Wednesday. By posting photos on the banners in the windows, tenants decided to show everyone how they really live. However, they might lose even this housing, as the authorities are planning to build a new central heating and power plant in its place. The tenants were offered to move into a different location or to be financially compensated. The prospect of moving into even smaller dorm rooms outraged the people, especially since the monetary compensation is quite crummy at only $960 per square meter. It is impossible to purchase housing for the offered amount, say the tenants. We're not going anywhere. We will litigate to the very end. We're going to be here, and if worse comes to worst, we'll resort to suicide. There are families with many children, people with disabilities, including kids, and pregnant women who live in our building. We want to live as civilized people of the 21st century. Gulzhan Aspanova owns 14 square meters here, sharing her apartment with 7 other people. Gulzhan is pregnant and extremely worried because she recently received an eviction notice along with the rest of the tenants. My baby is due soon, and I'm afraid that I would end up on the street. I go to bed and wake up thinking about it. The unusual activity of Astana residents alarmed the authorities. Referring to civil code, they reminded the tenants that their building once used to be a dormitory, and therefore they are only entitled to receive an equivalent housing. The head of the municipal housing enterprise reported that 12 people have already agreed to the offered compensations. There are no regulations on issuing housing in state-owned property. It could be any kind of offer. We can simply buy a room or an apartment on the real estate market. Apartments are only given as compensation if we also take an apartment, not room. Human rights activist Bolatbek Blalov, who agreed to support tenants, even referred to the international covenants. Yet the Communal Property Enterprise Administration politely ignored him. His question of why does the construction of the new heating plant make certain people miserable was left unanswered as well. Which of the parties is more aggressive? Is the tenants who simply wanted to address their concerns and express their aspirations, or the city administration which initiates such massive lawsuits and forced evictions? This might end up in a big social conflict. In the end, the protesters have sounded their statements demanding to establish a conciliation committee with human rights activists and tenants' representatives on board. The meeting of protesters was dismissed, leaving only photos in the windows.
Following South Kazakhstan region's police, officials of the financial police are expressing their disagreement with the assessment test results, which led to the dismissal of 28 employees. 6 former financial police officers filed a lawsuit demanding a retake of the examination.
There are some of the officers who have passed certain stages of certification, including scoring good results in knowledge of the law or passing a PT test while showing average in psychological stability. We've evaluated their performance level, taking into account how skilled and professional they are on duty. Some of the officers were found being involved in corruption. The total of 213 financial police officers went through the assessment in the first 2 weeks of August. 161 of them successfully passed the examination. 10 officers were recommended for promotion. 2 found underqualified and recommended for transfer to another department. 12 will be demoted and 28 operatives and investigators will be fired. This isn't the first time the police requested to retake the test. On Tuesday, 18 regional DIA officers who failed the assessment also asked for another try, which was denied.
Head of National Bank Grigory Marchenko announced that raising the retirement age for women to 63 years is inevitable. He noted at a press conference on Wednesday that the public did not offer any serious arguments against the change, while leaders of trade unions and NGOs insist that there is no economic justification to force women to work another 7 years. As an argument, they quote the chief banker himself, who said that the country's economy is stable.
Kazakh women must work until they reach the age of 63. Grigory Marchenko is adamant about the idea of raising women's retirement age. He stated during the briefing that he had not heard any solid arguments against his idea, although it was never really discussed on the national level. When the reform is discussed and adopted, the government will come up with preliminary drafts of the law and present them to the parliament, which will make the final decision. Most Kazakh women are not aware that the chief banker is after the idea of adding 7 more years to their retirement age. Otherwise, they would have already bombarded him with arguments and there would be no need to wait for a nationwide discussion. People are doing their best to survive. There is no stability. Personally, I think it is absolutely unacceptable to raise the retirement age in our country. Women are women and they are particularly strong in Kazakhstan, but this is really hard for them, and I disagree with the idea. Those women who gave birth to many children should retire earlier because it takes a lot of time and hard work to bring up children and give them good education. I think working until 63 is too much. It is highly unlikely that this little poll will change the opinion of the pension reformer. Labor unions' representatives say that social and medical factors should also be considered. Employers are reluctant to hire women over 35, and women close to the pension age often suffer from chronic diseases. Women who work for various enterprises fully devote themselves to their jobs, and when they retire, they are completely exhausted and worn out. If an employer wants to keep them on their jobs, he may draw up a contract and they may continue working. However, the majority of women should retire. Economists support labor unions. The head of the National Bank refers to economic feasibility, but wouldn't it be better if the country, with huge revenues from oil and natural resources, improved life conditions and actually started decreasing the retirement age? The retirement age for women in Kazakhstan is currently compared to the Western standards. In this case, the government should bring everything else in the country to the Western standards, including democratic development, lifestyle, as well as wage and pension rates. Experts forecast a social unrest if the bill is submitted to the parliament. MP Mukhtar Tinikeyev supports this opinion, saying that if Marchenko proposed his idea at a poultry farm, he would be pelted with rotten eggs. However, as often happens in Kazakhstan, even the most ardent opponents of unpopular amendments eventually end up obediently voting for them.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching and see you tomorrow.